Dear students and viewers, greetings. I'm Professor Archana Kaushik from the Department of Social Work, University of Delhi, Delhi. I welcome you all to this module on gender and sexual minorities. In a world increasingly conscious of rights, representation, and respect, it is essential that we understand and acknowledge the diverse identities around us. However, across cultures, countries, and centuries, people with non normative sexual orientations and gender identities, often called sexual minorities, have been labeled, marginalized, and denied the right to simply exist. This session may provide you with the insight to navigate and support gender and sexual diversity, especially in the context of India. Let us enlist the learning objectives of this session. First is to understand the distinction between gender identity, sexual orientation, and biological sex. Second is to explore the spectrum of gender and sexual minorities with inclusive and current terminology. Third, to examine the social stigma and legal barriers faced by LGBTQIA plus individuals in India. Fourth is to analyze the evolving legal and human rights landscape for sexual minorities. And fifth, to understand the role of social workers in advocacy, support, and empowerment of gender and sexual minorities. After going through this module, you will be able to define and differentiate key terms like transgender, intersex, non-binary, genderqueer, etc. Explain the challenges faced by gender and sexual minorities in a heteronormative society. Describe the role of social workers in upholding human rights and delivering support. Identify biases and barriers in services and how to address them effectively. You will also acquire knowledge about sexual minorities and their status in the society. This session, by and large, would help us to develop an analytical and critical thinking of the discriminatory practices that go subtly or explicitly with social functions. This would also help us to imbibe and practice democratic and egalitarian values of social work profession. Let us examine the issues related to sexual minorities. Normative values of a traditional society give recognition only to a heterosexual relationship, that is, between a man and a woman. However, this does not rule out the chance of presence of other sexual orientations, often termed as homosexuals. Being small in number and proportion, they are called sexual minority, and from social work perspective, they form a vulnerable group because of societal stigma and discrimination against them. Sexual minority is a group whose sexual identity, orientation, or practice differ from the majority of the surrounding society. Sexual minorities encompass individuals whose sexual orientation, gender identity, or sexual characteristics differ from the majority in a given society. This group typically includes lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender individuals, but also encompasses other non-heterosexual and non-cisgender people. Let us begin with understanding some definitions. First is biological sex, that refers to the physical characteristics, chromosomes, hormones, and reproductive anatomy that assign us as male, female, or intersex at birth. Then, gender identity is an internal sense of who we are: men, woman, both, neither, or somewhere along the gender spectrum. Gender expression is how we express our gender identity through behavior, clothing, voice, or body characteristics. Another term is sexual orientation. It is used to describe our emotional, romantic, or sexual attraction to others, be it towards the opposite gender, same gender, both, or neither. Lesbian is a woman attracted to another woman, and gay is a man attracted to other men, though sometimes used broadly. Bisexual people are attracted to more than one gender, and cisgender or simply cis is an adjective that describes a person whose gender identity aligns with the sex they are assigned at birth. Transgender or simply trans is an adjective used to describe someone whose gender identity differs from the sex assigned at birth. In Latin, cis means on this side, while trans means on the other side. The term transgender covers trans women and trans men. A trans woman is a person who is assigned male at birth but identifies as a woman, while a trans man is a person who was assigned female at birth but identifies as a man. Both terms are used to describe individuals who identify with a gender that differs from the sex they were assigned at birth and fall under the broad umbrella term transgender. Further, queer is an umbrella term for sexual and gender minorities, and intersex individuals are born with variations in sex characteristics. Asexual people are those who do not experience sexual attraction to either of the gender. Another related term is non-binary or gender queer. They are those people whose gender identity doesn't fit the traditional male or female norms. Together, these make up the LGBTQIA plus acronym. It may be reiterated that LGBTQIA plus stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, or questioning, intersex, asexual, and others represented by the plus. While LGBT refers broadly to same-sex attraction or gender diversity, the IA plus expands inclusivity. Intersex people are born with the physical sex traits and don't fit typically male or female categories. Asexual individuals experience little or no sexual attraction. The plus includes other identities such as pansexual, non-binary, genderqueer, and more, recognizing the full spectrum of human sexuality and gender. The term differs the right of all individuals to express their identity and be respected without conformity to social norms. This unit would help you to look at various social systems, rules, regulations, cultural practices, and behaviors of social identity with a critical angle of gender sensitivity. Imagine being rejected by your family for being yourself, or being bullied in school every day for who you love, or being denied a job because you express your identity. For many in the LGBTQIA plus community, this isn't imagination. It's their daily reality. The stigma around sexual and gender minorities is deeply rooted in social norms and colonial era morality. The labeling starts early, unnatural, confused, diseased, and quickly grows into exclusion. Colonial laws like Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code criminalized same-sex relationships for over 150 years. This draconian law was struck around in September 2018 by the Supreme Court in a historic ruling affirming the dignity and rights of LGBTQIA plus individuals. However, despite legal victories, social acceptance lags behind. Vast majority of these people undergo much oppression and suppression on daily basis. Let us examine and the expressions of labeling, stigma, discrimination faced by sexual and gender minorities and implications of the same. Family rejection can lead to homelessness. Bullying in schools leads to dropouts, self-harm and trauma. Workplace discrimination deprives them of dignity and livelihood. Healthcare bias leaves them without gender affirming care, HIV treatment, or even basic respect. Police harassment, often unreported, turns protectors into perpetrators. The consequences are devastating: depression, suicidal thoughts, substance abuse, and systemic poverty. This is not about identity anymore, it is about survival. Just because members of sexual minorities do not align with the heteronormativity, they face multiple jeopardy. Social exclusion of gender and sexual minorities is a systemic and pervasive issue that manifests across different spheres of life. This exclusion is often rooted in deep-seated social prejudice and institutionalized norms, leading to severe and lasting consequences for individuals and communities. The forms of social exclusion are visible in terms of family rejection. Many LGBTQ plus individuals face rejection from their families upon disclosing their sexual orientation or gender identity. This rejection can lead to youth homelessness, with LGBTQ plus youth disproportionately represented among the homeless population. The emotional trauma of being cast out by loved ones often precipitates mental health crisis, including chronic depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts. Bullying and discrimination in educational settings are rampant. LGBTQ plus students are frequently subjected to verbal, physical, and cyberbullying. Hostile school environments result in high dropout rates, poor academic performance, or reduced access to higher education opportunities. The lasting trauma of school based bullying can hinder social development and self esteem. Members of the gender and sexual minorities encounter discrimination in the workplace. With the denial of access to education and developmental opportunities for many, getting a respectable job is a distant dream. They often face bias around hiring, unequal pay, denial of their due promotion, and even termination based on their identity. This not only denies individuals with their right to livelihood and professional growth, but also strips them of dignity and economic security. Transgender individuals, in particular, often find themselves excluded from the formal employment altogether. Healthcare prejudice is also not uncommon. LGBTQ plus people often encounter stigmatizing attitudes from healthcare providers. This is especially pronounced for people living with HIV/AIDS who may face moral judgment or substandard care. Transgender individuals may struggle to access competent and respectful gender affirming healthcare. Fear of discrimination results in healthcare avoidance, worsening medical outcomes. Moreover, harassment by police and underreporting of violence are other expressions of gross discrimination. LGBTQ plus individuals, especially trans people and sex workers, often face profiling, harassment, and abuse by law enforcement. They are frequently denied justice as crimes against them may not be taken seriously or are not reported due to fear of secondary victimization. Let us understand the implications of this systemic exclusion. A major one is poor mental health outcomes. The cumulative excess of stigma, discrimination, and social rejection leads to disproportionately higher rates of depression, anxiety, PTSD, and suicidal ideation. Minority stress theory explains how chronic exposure to societal oppression increases psychological distress among LGBTQ plus individuals. As a coping mechanism, some individuals turn to alcohol or drug use, which can develop into substance dependency. This is often compounded by a lack of access to LGBTQ plus affirming mental health and rehabilitation services. In addition to substance abuse and sexual risk behaviors, sexual minorities are more vulnerable to STIs, including HIV. But it is unfortunate that they are considered a source of infection rather than vulnerable social group. This has cumulative effects on marginalization, victimization, and exploitation of sexual minorities. Moreover, due to exclusion from the education and formal employment, many individuals are pushed into informal, unstable, or exploitative labor. For some, sex work becomes a means of survival, often without labor, protection, or access to societal safety nets. Economic exclusion limits access to housing, healthcare, and financial independence. Further, they lack access to legal resources. Due to fear, mistrust, or lack of inclusive laws, many LGBTQ plus people do not seek legal help when faced with abuse, harassment, or exploitation. In many places, same sex relationships and gender non normativity are still criminalized, further eroding legal protections. Let us now focus on the legislative measures. The Indian legal landscape has witnessed a profound transformation in the last 2 decades. Once criminalized under the Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code, consensual same sex relationships were punishable by law, a colonial legacy that stayed for over 150 years. That changed in 2018 when the Supreme Court, in the Navtej Singh Johar versus Union of India ruling, struck out the law. A clip from the ruling says, "What is natural to one may not be natural to another. There is no reason to criminalize love." Transgender Persons Act 2019 prohibits discrimination in education, jobs, healthcare, and calls for welfare schemes, though its requirement of district level gender certification remains controversial. To translate law into lived experience, police must meet the people where they are. Recent government interventions have begun to acknowledge the urgent needs of sexual minorities. Smile Scheme, specifically as it relates to transgender persons, is support for marginalized individuals for livelihood and enterprise. This umbrella scheme includes a sub-scheme focusing on the comprehensive rehabilitation and welfare of transgender persons, along with another sub-scheme for persons engaged in begging. The Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment is responsible for this scheme, launched in 2021. It includes Garima Grahe shelters for transgender persons, offering food, health services and counseling, and livelihood training. National Transgender Portal enables online application for identity cards and certificates, promoting dignity and self-identification. Skill development covers inclusion of transgender persons in PM Daksh Skill India and Livelihood Mission marks a shift towards economic inclusion. For healthcare access under Ayushman Bharat, transgender individuals now receive coverage for gender affirming surgeries. Further, National Human Rights Commission's Transgender Protection Cell monitors complaints and rights violations. These steps are important, but real transformation lies not just in schemes but in changing hearts and minds. Next, the role of social worker may be examined. But before that, let us understand why social workers should study and intervene for gender and sexual minorities. Social work is not just a profession, it is a promise to stand beside those pushed to the margins. As social workers, our commitment lies in advocating for the marginalized and giving voice to the voiceless. Gender and sexual minorities often face multiple layers of discrimination, leading to deep rooted inequalities in health, education, employment, and personal safety. Studying these communities help social workers challenge their own biases and become culturally competent and address the unique psychosocial, legal, and health related needs of LGBTQIA plus individuals. Social workers are able to advocate for inclusive policies, community based interventions, and access to welfare schemes, and act as bridges between institutions and individuals, ensuring respectful, right based service delivery. It is not just a matter of professional responsibility, it is a matter of human rights and social justice. Let us now look at the social work response. Social workers can play a transformative role in this space. Here are some key responsibilities. First, advocacy and policy engagement that covers campaigning for the inclusive laws and policies, participate in pride movements, legal petitions, and awareness drives. Then, psychosocial support, offering counseling to the LGBTQIA plus individuals and families, addressing trauma, internalized stigma, and identity related stress. Third, domain is educational and sensitization, and that includes training healthcare providers, police personnel, teachers, and communities. Developing LGBTQ inclusive curricula in schools and colleges. Fourth one is access to services, and this entails helping navigate housing, education, employment, and healthcare schemes. Creating safe spaces and shelters. And fifth domain is related to creating awareness about STIs and HIV/AIDS, risk reduction interventions, and addressing health inequalities. Let us go back to history. Before colonial laws and Victorian values, India honored diversity in all its forms. The Vedas and Upanishads contain no rigid definition of gender or sexual roles. Everything is divine, formless, fluid, and infinite. Ardhanarishwara, the fusion of Shiva and Shakti, symbolizes the union of masculine and feminine in one body. Mohini, Vishnu's female avatar, defies fixed gender norms and is revered in classical mythology. Shikhandini, from the Mahabharata, was a great warrior who fought courageously. Tribal societies across India had roles for third gender people: priests, healers, and dancers. The problem is that we become self righteous. Whosoever thinks, behaves, lives like me is right, and all those who do not fit in my framework are wrong. No, the nature is diverse, and every human has the right and dignity to live as per their natural endowment. Let us now examine the layers of marginality through the viewpoint of intersectionality, which is crucial for designing effective social work response. It may be noted that sexual minorities do not live single issue lives. They may have multiple layers of vulnerability and marginality. So, a queer Dalit person, a trans Muslim woman, a gay male with a disability, each identity adds to a new layer of struggle and also needs a new lens for understanding justice. Social workers must adopt an intersectional approach, acknowledging how caste, class, gender, and religion intertwine in the lives of sexual minorities. Justice is not one size fit all. It must be tailored, layered, lived. Sexual minorities are not asking for special rights, just equal ones, not pity, just respect, not silence, but space to speak. As social workers, educators, and even as neighbors, we all have a role to play. Use correct pronouns, intervene in homophobic jokes, create inclusive classrooms, clinics, and communities. Learn, unlearn, and relearn every day. Inclusion begins not with the policy but with the people. Let us begin with compassion, with courage, and with commitment. Thus, to sum up, this session explored the identities, challenges, and rights of gender and sexual minorities in India. We examined updated terms within the LGBTQIA plus spectrum, traced their cultural roots, reviewed legal changes, and highlighted the critical role of social workers in this space. Through real world case studies and practical insights, the session highlighted how inclusive practices and intersectional perspectives can foster dignity and justice for marginalized communities. The legal framework and government initiatives are only the beginning. True inclusion begins in our homes, schools, streets, and systems. As social workers and citizens, our responsibility is to bridge the gap between policy and practice, ensuring that no person is left behind because of who they are and whom they love. Thank you.